August 2016, the nursing home hallway smelled of antiseptic and memories. Grace Kim sat in her wheelchair by the window, her hands trembling as they clutched something worn and weathered. Not a photograph, not a letter, a cowboy hat. Dusty faded, the leather sweatband cracked with age. Her granddaughter knelt beside her, confused. "Grandma, why do you keep this old thing?" Grace's eyes clouded with cataracts, but still sharp with remembering fixed on the hat. Her voice came soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of 70 years. "Because it taught me that mercy isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a man can do." The young woman waited, sensing a story she'd never heard. Grace lifted the hat, turned it slowly in her hands, touching the brim the way you'd touch something sacred. "This belonged to a cowboy named Jack Murphy. He saved my life in 1945. I was 16 years old. I'd been told Americans were demons, worse than anything I'd already survived." She paused, and for a moment her eyes cleared, looking not at the nursing home, but at something far away, something scorched by desert sun. I couldn't have been more wrong. The scene dissolved. The nursing home vanished. In its place, barbed wire stretching across sand adobe walls, baking under merciless August heat, and the sound of women weeping in languages that had no words left for hope. New Mexico, Fort Stanton Detention Facility, August 1945. Grace Kim, 16 years old, huddled in the corner of a converted barracks. The air inside reeked of mildew and sweat and lamp oil that had burned too long. Around her, 46 other women sat on thin mats, their eyes hollow, their bodies marked by exhaustion that went deeper than muscle and bone. They had been abandoned 3 days earlier when the Japanese guards fled into the night. The war was over. Japan had surrendered. But freedom had not arrived with that news. For these women, absence felt as dangerous as presence. Grace traced her finger across the floorboards, drawing invisible lines. Escape routes that led nowhere. Her other hand clutched a scrap of fabric torn from her old school uniform. It was filthy, now gray where it had once been white. But it was the last piece of soul she had left. The last proof that once 2 years ago she had been someone's daughter. Someone's student. Someone. Across from her sat Rosa Martinez, 23 years old, her hands scarred from fighting back once. She'd been a school teacher in Manila before the war reached her church steps. Now she sat with her back straight, eyes watchful, protecting the younger girls the way a mother bear guards cubs. She'd survived 3 stations by feeling nothing. But watching Grace trace those hopeless routes in the dust cracked something in her chest. Near the window, Machen wrote in the margins of a notebook with a piece of charred wood. 19 years old, daughter of a Shanghai merchant family she'd been kidnapped from church. The poetry she wrote would never be sent. But the act of writing kept her human, kept some part of her alive that the war couldn't kill. The women whispered to each other in Korean, Tagalog, Mandarin, their voices barely louder than the cicadas outside. None spoke of hope. Hope was a dangerous luxury, a knife that cut deeper than despair. One girl younger than Grace asked the question they all carried. "What do we do if the Americans come?" Rosa's voice came flat, empty. "Survive. Just survive. That's all we've ever done." But survival had rules, lessons learned in blood and shame. They knew soldiers. They knew what men in uniforms wanted. And they'd been told over and over in whispers and screams and carefully delivered propaganda that Americans were worse than demons. That if Japanese soldiers had been cruel, American soldiers would be monsters. The youngest girl started to cry. Someone hushed her. Tears changed nothing. That night they heard engines, not the sharp, efficient sound of Japanese trucks. Something heavier, deeper. A rumble that shook the ground and sent dust sifting through cracks in the walls. And underneath that mechanical growl, another sound. Horses. The whinnying of horses mixed with diesel engines and men's voices calling in a language none of them understood. Grace clutched her scrap of uniform tighter. Rosa pulled the younger girls close. May stopped writing mid-sentence, her hand frozen. The cicadas went silent. Even the desert air seemed to hold its breath. A dog barked somewhere outside, then silenced with a whimper. The women prepared themselves for what they thought was inevitable. They pulled their thin garments tight, lowered their heads, braced their bodies for the cycle they knew too well. Rosa whispered one last time, "Whatever comes, we face together." Grace closed her eyes and hummed her mother's lullaby. The one about birds that fly home. She'd stopped believing in home, but the melody still lived in her throat. The footsteps came, heavy boots on gravel, not the crisp march of infantry, something slower, more deliberate. The sound of men who'd spent their lives walking dirt roads and rocky trails, not parade grounds. The door rattled. Now, before we go further, I need to pause here. If you're watching this and you or someone you know served in the Southwest during World War II, this story might sound familiar. Many of you in the comments have shared memories of Fort Stanton, of the men who served there, the values they carried even in wartime. We're honored to tell this chapter of American history, a chapter about cowboys who became soldiers but never stopped being cowboys. Please like and subscribe so more people can hear these forgotten stories. Stories about the men who chose mercy when cruelty would have been easier. Let me take you back to how this all began. August 1945, the war had just ended in mushroom clouds and radio broadcasts. Across the Pacific, Allied forces were discovering the comfort stations, bamboo huts and concrete buildings where women had been kept like inventory. The U.S. government quietly brought some of these women to America ostensibly as witnesses for war crime tribunals. The reality was more complicated. They needed to be hidden, processed, handled carefully. The American public wasn't ready to hear these stories yet. Fort Stanton had been built as a cavalry post in the 1850s. Adobe walls thick enough to stop Apache arrows. Corrals that once held hundreds of horses. It sat in the high desert of Lincoln County, New Mexico, where the sky stretched forever, and the nearest town was an hour's ride on a good road. During the war, they'd converted it to a detention facility. German POWs, first then Japanese internees. By August 1945, most of it stood empty. That's where they brought the women. 47 survivors from stations across the Pacific. Different countries, different languages, but all carrying the same 1,000-yard stare. The Army assigned Nisei guards, Japanese-American soldiers who'd proven their loyalty in Italy and France, who wore the uniform with fierce pride. But when Japan surrendered, something broke. These men had families in internment camps, brothers who died fighting for America while their parents lived behind barbed wire. The irony of guarding Japanese comfort women while their own mothers had been imprisoned became too much. On the night of August 15th, they fled. They left the gates open, left food in the kitchen, left a note that said simply, "We're sorry, we can't do this." For 3 days, the women waited in that limbo between captivity and freedom. The water tap still worked. They had rice. But they didn't know if they should leave, if they could leave, if the gate standing open was a test or a trap. The Army discovered the situation on August 18th. They needed men to secure the facility fast, men who could handle a delicate situation, men who understood that these women had been through hell and needed something more than standard military protocol. They didn't send infantry, they sent cowboys. The 112th Cavalry Regiment had been formed from ranch hands and rodeo riders across Texas and New Mexico. Men who'd enlisted after Pearl Harbor, but never quite lost the swagger of the saddle. They'd trained on horseback when other units trained in tanks. They'd fought in the Pacific with the same stubborn courage that breaks horses and faces down stampedes. Now stationed at Fort Bliss pending discharge, they got orders to secure Fort Stanton. "Handle it gentle," the order said. These women have been through enough. The orders were unnecessary. Cowboys don't need to be told how to treat women. The code runs deeper than regulation, deeper than law. It's written in the marrow of men who grow up where the nearest neighbor is 10 miles away and your reputation is all you own. Protect the weak, feed the hungry, never ever harm a woman, no matter who she is. Sergeant Jack Murphy, 26 years old, red hair already fading to copper in the New Mexico sun, read the briefing and felt his jaw tighten. He'd grown up on a ranch outside Austin. His little sister Katie was 16, the same age as some of these women. The briefing used careful language, clinical terms. But Murphy understood what comfort stations meant, what had been done. He gathered his men in the motor pool, 22 cowboys wearing army green. They stood the way men stand, who've spent more time with horses than people. Weight on one leg, thumbs hooked in belts, faces weathered beyond their years. "Listen up," Murphy said. His Texas drawl made every word slower, heavier. "We're going to Fort Stanton. There's women there. They've been hurt bad. Worse than I want to put into words. Our job is simple. We feed them. We protect them. We treat them like you'd treat your mama or your sister. Like ladies. Like human beings. Anyone got a problem with that? Silence. The kind of silence that's louder than speech. Corporal David Miller, the medic from Iowa who'd wanted to be a veterinarian before the war, spoke up. They're going to be scared of us. Probably. What do we do about that? Murphy pulled his harmonica from his pocket, turned it over in his hands. We give them space. We give them time. We show them, not tell them. Cowboys don't make promises with words. We make them with actions. Private Hayes, the chaplain who'd been a Baptist minister before enlisting, added softly, we show them mercy, real mercy, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. They loaded into trucks just after sundown. The convoy rolled out across the high desert headlights, cutting through gathering dark. Murphy rode in the lead vehicle, his harmonica in one pocket, a letter from Katie in the other. She'd written about her 16th birthday, about the dress Mama made, about hoping the war would end soon so her big brother could come home. He thought about the women at Fort Stanton, 16 years old, some of them. No birthday dresses, no mama's cooking, just survival. The convoy pulled through Fort Stanton's gates at 2200 hours. The place looked abandoned. Guard towers empty. No lights except moonlight on adobe. But Murphy could feel them. The women, watching from the shadows, terrified. He stepped down from the truck. Dust rose around his boots. The other cowboys dismounted, moving quiet, careful, like approaching a spooked herd. Murphy pulled his Stetson lower, checked his rifle, then deliberately slung it over his shoulder, barrel down. Non-threatening, he looked at Miller, at Hayes, at the others. Remember, he said, we're here to help, even if they don't believe it yet. They walked toward the main barracks. Murphy could hear crying inside, whispers in languages he didn't understand. Fear has a sound. It cuts across every tongue. He stopped at the door, put his hand on the latch. Behind him, his men waited. 22 cowboys who'd seen combat in jungles and islands, who'd faced bonsai charges and artillery barrages. None of it had prepared them for this. For women who'd been taught to fear the very uniform they wore. Murphy took a breath, said a prayer his mama taught him, then opened the door. Sunlight exploded through the doorway. After 3 days of shadows, it hit the women like a physical blow. They shrank back, hands over eyes, bodies curling inward. Murphy stepped into the frame. His silhouette filled the entrance. Broad shoulders, the unmistakable outline of a Stetson instead of an army helmet. Rifle slung low and loose. Behind him, more silhouettes, more hats, more boots. Grace had been told what American soldiers looked like. Brutal, massive, hungry. But these men looked different. They stood different and like they were more comfortable on horseback than on foot. Murphy's voice came low and slow. That Texas drawl stretched words into something almost musical. Easy now, ladies. Nobody's gonna hurt you. The women didn't understand English, but they understood tone. And this tone carried no edge, no command, just something close to gentleness. Murphy raised his hands, palms out, empty. The universal gesture of peace. Behind him, the other cowboys did the same. 22 pairs of hands raised, showing no weapons, no threat. Then Murphy did something that made Grace's breath catch. He removed his hat, tipped it slightly the way men do when greeting someone they respect. His red hair caught the sunlight. Name's Jack Murphy. We're here to help. Grace couldn't parse the words, but the gesture of removing the hat, holding it against his chest, bowing slightly from the waist. That gesture spoke louder than language. It said, I see you, I respect you, you're worth this small piece of courtesy. Rosa watched from her corner. She'd seen men bow before, usually before they stopped pretending to be human. But this felt different. This cowboy's stance, the way his weight settled on his heels, relaxed, patient. She'd never seen a soldier stand like that. Soldiers stood rigid, ready. These men stood like they had all the time in the world. 2 cowboys carried wooden crates into the barracks. They set them down with the careful slowness of men handling newborn colts. Gentle, deliberate. Then they stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. Murphy gestured to the crates. Figured y'all might be hungry. He knelt, moving slow, and opened the first crate. The lid cracked with a sound like a rifle shot. The women flinched, but Murphy didn't rush, just lifted the lid and stepped away. Inside, tin cans catching lamplight, red labels, white labels, blue labels, pictures of peaches and beans and things the women had no names for. Grace stared. Soldiers didn't bring food. Soldiers took food. They took everything. This violated every rule of survival she'd learned. But the crates sat there, open, offered. Murphy watched the women's faces, saw the disbelief, the suspicion. He'd gentled wild horses before. This wasn't so different. You didn't rush. You didn't force. You made the offer and waited for trust to build one small moment at a time. Miller the medic stepped forward, pulled something from his pack, a glass bottle curved and iconic. Coca-Cola. He opened it with a church key. The fizz sounded loud in the silence. He took a sip, sighed with satisfaction, then set the bottle on the ground, slid it gently toward the women. Still no one moved. Murphy exchanged glances with Hayes. This was harder than expected. These women had been taught to fear Americans more than death. Words wouldn't fix that, only time and proof. But they didn't have much time. Orders said process them fast. Get them to hospitals, get them home, or get them asylum. The Army wanted this quiet, efficient, forgotten. Murphy had other ideas. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a small package wrapped in wax paper. Chocolate. A Hershey bar he'd been saving. He unwrapped it slowly, the paper crackling. Broke off a square. Grace watched his hands. Scarred hands, calloused from rope and reins, but they moved gently, carefully. Murphy held the chocolate out toward Grace. She was closest, youngest. Her eyes so full of terror it hurt to look at her. She shook her head violently, covered her mouth with both hands, pressed herself further into the corner. Murphy saw the panic, didn't understand it, but he saw. Miller whispered, "They think we're going to hurt them." "How do we show them we ain't?" Hayes said quietly. "Patience. Trust got to be earned." Murphy looked at the chocolate in his hand, looked at Grace's terrified face. Then he did something his mama would have approved of, something silly and human and completely non-threatening. He popped the chocolate into his own mouth, chewed it with exaggerated pleasure, rolled his eyes like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted, swallowed, opened his mouth to show it was gone. Not poison, not a trick, just chocolate. Then he grinned, that lopsided, goofy grin of a man who knows he looks ridiculous and doesn't care. The absurdity of it hit May first. This soldier, this American, this supposed demon making faces like a child showing off for laughs. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. She clapped her hands over her mouth, shocked at herself. Murphy's grin widened. He broke off another piece of chocolate, held it out again. Slower this time, more patient. Grace's hand moved before her brain caught up. Just an inch, fingers extending. Then she pulled back. Murphy set the chocolate on the floor between them, slid it gently toward her, like making an offering at a shrine. Then he stood, stepped back, gave her space. "It's yours," he said softly. "No strings, no price, just chocolate." Grace stared at the small brown square. Her body remembered every time a gift had come with conditions, every time kindness had been a lie hiding cruelty. Her instincts screamed trap, but Rosa was moving, slowly. The older woman reached for one of the tin cans. Her hands shook like leaves in a storm. She pulled it close, clutched it to her chest. A can of peaches, just peaches. But the weight of it in her arms felt like proof that maybe the world still had small mercies left. Murphy smiled, not a predatory smile, not a smile that wanted something. Just a smile that said, "Good. That's yours now." Miller knelt and pulled out another bottle of water. Clear, clean, condensation beating on the glass. He slid it across the floor. This time Grace didn't hesitate as long. Her hand darted out, grabbed the bottle, pulled it back like stealing fire from gods. She lifted it to her lips. The first swallow was sharp cold cutting through 3 days of thirst. She closed her eyes, clutched the bottle like it was her own heartbeat. And in that moment, surrounded by cowboys who stood patient and still, Grace felt the first crack in the wall she'd built around hope. These men weren't rushing forward, weren't demanding, weren't taking. They were just waiting. Rosa whispered in Tagalog to May. "What are they?" May whispered back in broken English she'd learned before the war. I don't know, but they're not what we were told. Murphy stood in the doorway backlit by desert sun. He pulled something else from his pocket. Small, metal, worn smooth by years of use. A harmonica. The women tensed. What was that thing? Some kind of weapon? Murphy lifted it to his lips and played. The first notes came out clumsy, slightly off key, not the sharp commands they expected. Not orders barked in foreign tongues. Music. The melody of Red River Valley floated through the barracks, soft, imperfect, achingly human. Grace's breath stopped. She knew music. Her mother had sung to her, lullabies about mountains and rivers and home. But that was before. Music belonged to a world that no longer existed, a world where soldiers didn't make art, they made corpses. Yet here was this red-haired cowboy playing a song like it was the most natural thing on earth, like beauty still had a place in hell. Murphy hit a wrong note, winced, tried again, messed it up worse. Behind him, the other cowboys chuckled, not at the women, at Murphy's terrible playing. And Murphy laughed too, shook his head at himself, made a show of being embarrassed. Grace stared. Soldiers didn't laugh at themselves. Soldiers didn't show weakness. Soldiers didn't make mistakes and turn them into jokes. But cowboys did. May's laugh came fuller this time, real. Murphy's grin answered it. Music fixes what words can't, ma'am, he said, though she couldn't understand. He played again, better this time, the melody sweet and slow. Grace felt something shifting in her chest, something dangerous, something like hope trying to claw its way back from the grave. In her hand, the chocolate was melting from the heat of her palm. She looked at it, looked at Murphy, looked at the other cowboys standing patient as stones. And slowly, carefully, like touching fire, she brought the chocolate to her lips. It tasted like sweetness she'd forgotten existed. The chocolate melted on Grace's tongue. Sweetness flooded her senses. Not just sugar, but the taste of something offered freely, something given without demands. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The richness, the softness, the small mercy of flavor after years of flavorless survival. When she opened her eyes, Murphy was already turning away, giving her privacy, giving her space. He walked to where Miller stood and spoke in low tones, not about her, not planning anything, just two men coordinating logistics, like ranch hands deciding which fence to mend. Rosa still held the can of peaches. Her fingers traced the label. She couldn't read English, but the picture told the story. Golden fruit suspended in syrup. She'd taught children to read before the war. Now she could barely remember what classroom walls looked like. But this can in her hands felt solid, real. Proof that somewhere orchards still grew, somewhere fruit still ripened on the trees. May watched the cowboys move through the barracks. They didn't swagger, didn't posture. They moved with the efficient economy of men who'd worked hard their whole lives. Every gesture purposeful but never threatening. One of them, the youngest with sun-bleached hair, knelt and pulled something from his pack. A wooden carving, small enough to fit in a palm, a bird with wings spread. Rough cut, the tool marks still visible but recognizable. Beautiful in its simplicity. He set it on the floor, slid it gently toward the women, then stood and stepped back. Grace crept forward, every muscle ready to bolt. But curiosity pulled stronger than fear. She reached the bird, picked it up. The wood was smooth where his thumb had worn it, warm from his pocket. She cradled it in both hands. This cowboy had taken time to carve this, had chosen to make something beautiful. Soldiers destroyed. They didn't create. Yet here was proof that these men's hands could shape and craft and give life to wood. May whispered in Chinese. They're so strange. Rosa answered in Spanish, though neither understood the other's chords. They understood the tone. Confusion mixing with something dangerously close to wonder. Miller moved to the doorway, called out in English. More cowboys appeared carrying basins. Clean water sloshed in metal containers. Bars of soap wrapped in paper. Towels folded with military precision. The women tensed. Water meant inspection. Water meant violation disguised as hygiene. But Miller set the basins down in the corner, away from the door. Private. He unwrapped one bar of soap. The scent hit the air. Lavender. The women gasped. Flowers. Real flowers distilled into soap. Not lion ash. Not the harsh carbolic they'd known. May touched her face, her hands. When had she last felt clean? Really clean. Not just the absence of dirt, but the presence of care, of dignity. Miller gestured to the water, to the soap, made washing motions. Then he pointed to them, to the corner, and deliberately turned his back. Faced the wall, all the cowboys did. Turned away, gave them privacy. Rosa understood first. They were offering baths, real baths, and they were turning away, not watching, not demanding, just offering and then removing themselves from the equation. She stood. Her legs shook. 3 days of rationed water and fear had weakened her more than she'd realized. But she walked to the basin, knelt, dipped her hands in. The water was cool, clean. She could see the bottom of the basin through it. No sediment, no oil, just water being water. She picked up the soap, lathered. The scent of lavender rose like a prayer. Bubbles formed white and pure. She rubbed her hands together, watched the dirt dissolve, watched the soap carry away grime and shame and the residue of captivity. Tears came. She couldn't stop them. But these tears felt different. Not the helpless tears of pain, the cathartic tears of being allowed to be human again. Grace approached next, then May, then others. One by one they came to the water, washed faces, washed hands. Some wept, some stayed silent. But all of them felt the same shift, this small dignity of clean skin, of smelling like flowers instead of fear. Murphy stood facing the wall, his back straight, patient. He heard the splashing, the quiet crying, the whispered words in foreign languages. He didn't turn, didn't peek. His mama had raised him better than that. Hayes stood beside him. The chaplain's lips moved in silent prayer, thanking God for this small mercy, asking for more, asking for healing that went deeper than soap and water could reach. After 10 minutes, Rosa spoke. Not words, just a small sound, a cleared throat. Murphy turned slowly, saw the women look different, still scared, still fragile, but cleaner, a little more like themselves. Better, he asked. Rosa didn't understand the word, but she nodded, once. Brief. Murphy tipped his hat. Then he pulled his harmonica out again. This time he played something softer, slower, Amazing Grace, the hymn his grandmother sang. He didn't know these women's faith if they had any left, but the melody spoke across all belief, about being lost, about being found. Grace listened. She didn't know this song, but its sadness and hope tangled together in notes that seemed to understand exactly what she felt. Lost, found, broken, healing. The bird carvings sat in her lap. The harmonica played. The smell of lavender hung in the air. For the first time since capture, Grace felt something stir that wasn't fear or despair. Something small, fragile, but undeniably alive. Hope. Murphy finished the song, lowered the harmonica, looked at the women with eyes that held no threat, just tired kindness. "You all ready to see the sky?" he asked. He gestured to the door, to the sunlight beyond. The women froze. Outside meant exposure. Outside meant danger. The barracks had been a cage, but cages feel safe when the world outside is full of predators. Murphy didn't force, didn't command. He just stood in the doorway, harmonica in hand, letting the invitation hang there. The choice theirs to make. Rosa looked at Grace, at May, at the others. They'd survived by staying small, by hiding, by making themselves invisible. But Murphy had played music, had carved birds, had given soap that smelled like gardens. Maybe the world outside had changed while they'd been locked in shadows. Rosa stood, her decision, her risk. She walked toward the door like walking toward execution. Each step heavy, but she kept walking. She reached Murphy. He stepped aside, made room, didn't touch her, didn't guide her, just made space. Rosa stepped through the doorway. Sunlight hit her full force. Desert sun in August, brutal and honest. She raised her hand to shade her eyes, blinked against the brightness. The sky stretched forever, endless blue. Not the close ceiling of the barracks, not the boundaries of walls, just sky and distance and the particular silence of high desert where wind carries across miles. Rosa stood in it, felt sun on her skin, not the oppressive heat of confinement, but the clean heat of open air. She breathed deep, creosote and dust and something indefinable. Freedom smelled like this, like nothing and everything at once. Behind her, the other women watched, saw her standing in sunlight, saw she was not shot, not grabbed, not harmed. One by one, they followed. Now, I need to pause here for a moment. These small acts of dignity that we're witnessing, the soap, the clean water, the choice to step outside, they might seem simple. But for women who'd been stripped of every choice, every comfort, every shred of human dignity, these moments were revolutionary. They were proof that the values we hold dear as Americans, respect, kindness, the belief that every person deserves to be treated with honor, those values survived even in war's darkest corners. If this story reminds you of what makes America great, please share it. Let others remember, and in the comments, tell us about acts of kindness you witnessed or experienced during this era. Your memories matter. Your stories deserve to be told. Outside, the world opened up. The 47 women stood in the sun, blinking like creatures emerging from caves. The fort spread around them. Adobe buildings, corrals, desert stretching to mountains in the distance. And in the center of the compound, smoke rose. The smell hit them. Rich, savory, meat cooking, their stomachs clenched with hunger they'd been ignoring for days. Murphy gestured toward the smoke. Come on, let's get some food in you. They followed him, a slow procession of women who'd forgotten how to walk without fear. Cowboys fell in around them, not hurting, not controlling, just walking alongside, protective without being possessive. The source of the smoke appeared, a makeshift grill, metal drums cut in half, mesquite wood burning underneath, and on the grill bacon, strips of pork belly curling at the edges, fat rendering dripping into the coals and sending up little flares of flame. Burgers sizzled, thick patties of beef, onions cooking beside them going translucent and sweet. Beans bubbled in a pot, ranch style with chunks of beef and peppers. Fresh bread sat wrapped in cloth. The cowboys were cooking. Not cooks, not kitchen staff. The soldiers themselves. Murphy flipped burgers with a spatula. Miller stirred beans. Hayes sliced tomatoes with a pocket knife, his movements precise as surgery. They looked relaxed. At home. Like this was Saturday afternoon at a ranch, not a military operation. Grace stared. She'd seen soldiers eat, seen them take the best portions while prisoners starved. But these men were cooking for everyone. The smell alone was enough to make her dizzy. Murphy looked up, saw the women standing uncertainly. He grinned, waved them closer. Ain't fancy, but it's hot. Y'all must be starving. He loaded a plate, burger on bread, 3 strips of bacon, scoop of beans, handed it to Grace with both hands. A presentation, an offering. She took the plate, stared at it. The burger was huge. Juice ran where the patty met the bread. The bacon glistened with rendered fat. The beans steamed. She'd been given rice, scraps, the minimum to survive. Never a plate piled high, never more than necessary. This was abundance. This was generosity. This was being valued. Grace lifted the burger, opened her mouth, bit down, flavor exploded. Salt and char and beef and fat. The texture of meat cooked right, juices running down her chin. She chewed and tears started. Not sad tears, shock tears. The shock of food being good, of being given plenty, of taste that made her remember meals before the war, family dinners, celebrations, normalcy. She couldn't stop. Bite after bite. The burger disappeared. The bacon crunch salty and perfect. The beans were savory and slightly sweet. Rosa ate slower, savoring. Each bite a meditation. She taught children about gratitude before the war. Now she was learning it again from cowboys who cooked with care. May ate and laughed between bites. It's so good, she said in Chinese. I forgot food could be good. The cowboys ate too, sat on the ground near the women, not hovering, not watching with expectation, just eating their own meals, passing ketchup, sharing tobacco, normal men having a normal meal. Except nothing about this was normal. They'd created normal. forced it into existence through sheer determination to treat these women like human beings. Murphy pulled out 2 Coca-Cola bottles, opened them with a church key, the fizz and pop distinctive. He handed one to Grace. She took it. The glass was cold, condensation wet on her palm. She sniffed it. Sweet, strange. She sipped. Bubbles exploded in her mouth. Carbonation tickled her nose. The sweetness was intense, different from anything she'd tasted, but good, strange and good. Murphy drank from his bottle. Nothing like a Coke in the desert makes everything better. Grace didn't understand his words, but she understood the satisfaction in his voice, the simple pleasure. She took another sip. Let the sweetness and bubbles coat her tongue. The meal continued. Cowboys served seconds, thirds. Nobody counted, nobody rationed, just kept cooking and serving until everyone was full. Hayes brought out something wrapped in wax paper. Unwrapped it to reveal pie. Apple pie, the crust, golden, the filling, still warm. Chaplin makes the best pie in 3 counties, Miller said. Even better than my mama's, though. Don't tell her I said that. Hayes cut slices, handed them out. Grace took hers with trembling hands, put a piece in her mouth. Apples and cinnamon and butter. Sweetness that wasn't cloying. The taste of harvest, of home, of everything autumn meant in a country she'd never seen. She closed her eyes, let herself taste it fully. Let herself be present in this moment where men fed her dessert and asked nothing in return. To understand what happened next, you need to know about the cowboy code. It wasn't written in any book. No officer taught it. But every ranch hand from Texas to Montana knew it by heart. Knew it in their bones the way they knew how to sit a saddle or read weather in the sky. The code was simple. Protect the weak. Feed the hungry. Your word is your bond. Take pride in your work. Respect all people. And above all, never harm a woman. Not ever. Not for any reason. Jack Murphy grew up on a ranch outside Austin. 500 acres of scrub and grass where his father raised cattle and his mother raised children. Murphy learned to rope before he learned to write. Learned to break horses before he learned to drive. The code wasn't taught with words. It was taught by watching his father tip his hat to every woman they passed, wealthy or poor. By watching his mother be treated like a queen even when she was covered in dust from working cattle. When Murphy enlisted after Pearl Harbor, he brought the code with him. So did Miller and Hayes and every other cowboy in the 112th. The Army gave them orders. But the code gave them honor. These women needed honor more than orders. After the meal, Hayes approached with paper and pencils. The women tensed. Paper meant forms. Forms meant bureaucracy. Bureaucracy meant being processed, being made official, being categorized and filed away. But Hayes set the stack down gently, pulled out one sheet, picked up a pencil, and wrote, Robert Hayes, Georgia, Baptist, his name, his home, his faith. He slid the pencil toward Rosa, gestured, Write, tell us who you are. Rosa stared at the blank page. When had she last written her name, really written it, not signed a form, not filled a blank, but claimed her identity in ink? Her hand shook as she picked up the pencil. The wood felt strange, smooth, clean, not a weapon, not a tool of interrogation, just a pencil. She pressed lead to paper, formed letters slowly. Rosa Elena Martinez, Manila. Her name, her city, her existence condensed to 11 letters in one place. But seeing it on paper made it real. Made her real. Not a number, not a body, a person with a name and a home. Grace watched Rosa write, saw the tears falling on the page, understood without words what was happening. This was resurrection. This was being allowed to exist again. Grace took paper, took pencil, wrote in Korean, Kim Yoon-hye, Grace Kim, Seoul. The Hangul characters looked foreign on the page after so long. But they were hers, her name and her language. Proof that she came from somewhere. That somewhere a mother named her, a father held her, a life existed before hell. May wrote in Chinese, characters flowing with practiced ease. She'd written poetry through captivity. But this was different. This was official. This was telling these cowboys who she was, where she came from, that she mattered. Hayes collected the pages gently. We'll send letters to Red Cross. Find your families if we can. Get word you're alive. Through May's broken English fragments of meaning passed. Letters, families, alive. Hope that dangerous thing grew stronger. Grace stared at her name on paper. She'd written one more thing below it. Umayoni nanan salaseo. Mother, I am alive. That was all she could manage. All the words that would fit around the knot in her throat. How could she explain the last 2 years? How could she put into words what had been done, what she'd survived, what she'd lost? Better to keep it simple. I am alive. I am found. I am writing to you. The sun climbed higher. The heat intensified. The cowboys set up shade. Tarps stretched between posts. The women moved underneath, grateful for the relief. Miller approached with his medical bag. The women recoiled instantly. Doctors meant pain. Medical exams meant violation disguised as care. They'd learned to fear the Red Cross symbol more than military insignia. Miller saw the fear, stopped where he stood, set the bag down, stepped back, raised his hands. I won't touch you unless you say okay, he said softly. I just want to help. Any cuts, bruises, infections, I can treat them. But only if you want. The words meant nothing to most of them, but his body language spoke clearly. The distance he maintained, the way he kept his hands visible, the gentleness in his voice. He waited. 5 minutes, then 10. Just standing there, patient as stone. Cowboys knew how to wait, how to let things come to them in their own time. Rosa showed her arm first, a cut from barbed wire. 3 days old, starting to fester. She held it out like an accusation, like a test. Miller knelt. May I, he reached forward slowly, telegraph the movement, give her time to pull back. When she didn't, he touched the wound with fingers gentle as prayer. He cleaned it. Iodine stung. Rosa flinched but didn't pull away. He applied salve, bandaged it, then sat back. That's it. Done. No demands, no invasive exams, no violation. Rosa stared at the white bandage. Clean, neat, professional. He'd touched her body without taking anything from it, had healed without harm. She started to cry. Full body sobs that she'd been holding back for 3 days. For 3 years. For every moment since violence first came into her life. Miller didn't try to comfort her, didn't touch, just waited. Let her cry. Cowboys understood that sometimes tears were the only medicine that really worked. One by one, others came forward, showed injuries, burns, bruises, rope marks. Each was treated with the same quiet respect. Each bandage applied became proof that care could exist without cost. Grace had burns on her wrists, old ones, scarred over. Miller saw them and his jaw tightened. Not anger at her, fury at whoever had done this, but he controlled it, breathed, applied salve anyway, even though they were healed, because sometimes the gesture mattered more than the medicine. I'm sorry, he whispered, not expecting her to understand, just needing to say it, needing to apologize on behalf of all men who'd failed to protect. I'm so sorry this happened to you, but Grace heard the tone, heard something like sorrow, like shame that wasn't his to carry, but he carried anyway. She touched his hand briefly. Thank you. Forgiveness. Connection across language. Evening came. The heat broke. Desert air cooled rapidly once the sun dropped. Cowboys built a fire. Not for cooking, for light, for warmth, for gathering. Murphy pulled out his harmonica again, played while stars emerged. The women sat closer now, not touching the cowboys, but near enough, close enough to feel the heat of the fire, to see faces in the firelight. Hayes opened his Bible, not to preach, just to read, the 23rd Psalm. Even though they didn't understand English, the rhythm of it carried, the cadence of ancient poetry that spoke to something deeper than words, about walking through valleys of death, about fear, about comfort in darkness. When he finished, May sung, soft at first, a Chinese song about moon and distance and longing for home. Her voice cracked with disuse, but the melody held. The other women joined. Different songs, different languages. A strange choir of survivors finding their voices again. Murphy listened, didn't understand a single word, but understood everything. These were songs of grief and hope tangled together. Songs that said, we're still here, we're still human, we're still capable of beauty. When the singing stopped, Grace spoke, in Korean, asking a question nobody could answer but everyone felt. Rosa translated the feeling, if not the words. She asked, if you are kind, then who were the monsters? The question hung in firelight, unanswerable, terrible in its simplicity. Hayes tried, through gestures in May's broken English. Not all soldiers are same. Not all men are evil. Some try to be better. But the real answer couldn't be spoken, only demonstrated, day after day, moment by moment. Through choices that said, I see you as human, I choose to honor that. I choose mercy. Grace lay on a mat that night. The cowboys had given them real bedding, blankets, pillows. She clutched the wooden bird in one hand. Outside guards walked the perimeter. But these guards weren't guarding them. They were guarding against threats that might come from outside. For the first time in 3 years, Grace slept without expecting the door to open to violence, without expecting the night to bring fresh horrors. Murphy played harmonica softly. Amazing grace. Red River Valley, simple cowboy songs that meant nothing and everything. The harmonica became a signal. Night would pass peacefully, morning would come. They were safe. Not in the way walls make you safe. Safe in the way good men make you safe. Men who choose honor over hate. Grace's last thought before sleep took her. Maybe the world is bigger than I thought. Maybe uniforms don't tell the whole story. Maybe some men choose to be different. The harmonica played on. The stars wheeled overhead. And for one night in August 1945, mercy existed in a place where only cruelty had lived before. Morning came with rooster crows from a nearby ranch. The sound was so ordinary, so peaceful, that Grace woke confused. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the wooden bird on the mat beside her, remembered cowboys, remembered bacon and music and clean water, remembered that yesterday Mercy had worn a Stetson. Outside, the camp stirred with quiet efficiency. Cowboys moved through morning routines honed by years of ranch life. Coffee brewing over coals, breakfast prep, the comfortable silence of men who knew how to work together without needing words. Miller stood by his medical supplies, organizing bandages. He'd been thinking all night about the burns he'd seen. The scars, the evidence of systematic cruelty written on bodies too young to carry such marks. His hands trembled slightly as he rolled gauze. Anger and sorrow mixed in his chest until he couldn't tell them apart. Hayes approached, put a hand on Miller's shoulder. You okay, Dave? Miller shook his head. No, I'm not. I keep thinking about my little cousin. She's Grace's age, goes to sock hops and worries about algebra tests. These girls, his voice broke. These girls have seen hell. I know. How do we make this right? How do we fix this? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then, we can't fix it, we can't undo it, but we can show them that not all men are monsters, that some of us still believe in honor. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. Miller nodded, wiped his eyes, finished organizing his supplies. He didn't know that Grace had been watching from the barracks window. Didn't know she'd seen him cry for her. Didn't know that seeing a soldier's tears for her pain had cracked something open in her chest. A space where forgiveness might grow. Murphy called everyone to breakfast. Eggs this time. Scrambled in a huge cast-iron skillet. Toast made over the fire. More bacon because cowboys believed you could never have too much bacon. Coffee for those who wanted it. Grace tried coffee for the first time. It was bitter. Strange. But Murphy showed her how to add sugar. How to make it sweet. She stirred and watched the sugar dissolve. Such a small thing. Such a huge thing. The power to choose how something tasted. After breakfast, the cowboys started to play catch. Baseball, America's pastime. Two of them tossed a ball back and forth, the leather smacking into gloves with that distinctive pop. Grace watched from the shade. She'd never seen baseball before. In Korea, girls didn't play sports. In captivity, play didn't exist. But watching these grown men throw a ball laugh when they missed that looked like freedom. Like joy with no purpose except itself. Murphy noticed her watching, held up the ball. Want to try? Grace didn't understand the words, but she understood the gesture, the invitation. She shook her head. No, too scared, too uncertain. Murphy shrugged. Okay, no pressure. He threw to Miller instead. But Grace kept watching. The arc of the ball, the catch, the throw, back and forth, rhythmic, peaceful, hypnotic in its simplicity. After 10 minutes, Murphy tried again. Tossed the ball gently toward Grace. It landed at her feet, rolled to a stop. She stared at it, leather stitched with red thread, worn smooth by use. Just a ball, not a weapon, not a trick, just a ball that wanted to be thrown. She picked it up, heavier than expected, solid, real. Murphy gestured. Throw it back. Grace's arm moved before her brain could stop it. The throw was terrible, wild, went 3 feet to the left. Murphy chased it down, grinned. Good try again. He threw it back to her, gentle, easy to catch. She grabbed it, felt a smile trying to form on her face, fought it, failed. She threw again. Better this time. Murphy caught it. There you go. You got an arm. 3 more throws, each better than the last. And then it happened. Grace laughed, a real laugh, small, surprised, but unmistakably joyful. The sound made every cowboy in the compound stop, turn, watch. Because that sound, that laugh from a girl who had every reason to never laugh again, that was why they wore the uniform. That was what they were fighting for, the possibility of laughter after darkness. Murphy's eyes got wet. He threw the ball again. Grace caught it, threw it back, laughed again, louder this time. May joined. Then Rosa. Soon 4 women were playing catch with cowboys, and the absurdity of it, the beauty of it, the sheer human normalcy of it, filled the morning with something that felt like healing. Now, before we continue, I need to tell you something. That moment when Grace laughed while playing baseball, Jack Murphy later said it was the most important moment of his life. More important than any battle. More important than medals or commendations. Because in that laugh, he heard proof that humanity survives, that joy can return, that mercy matters. If you've ever witnessed a moment where kindness changed someone's life, share this video. Let others see what's possible when we choose honor over hate. And tell us in the comments what happened when Grace returned to Korea with that American harmonica. The answer will surprise you. We'll reveal it at the end. The playing continued until the heat grew too intense. Everyone retreated to shade. Cowboys passed around canteens, shared water freely, no rationing, no counting, just thirst and water and the simple act of sharing. Rosa sat with May under a tarp. They'd been talking in gestures and broken phrases, piecing together understanding across languages. Now Rosa spoke, her voice carrying something heavy. May translated haltingly to Grace. Rosa says, "The kindness hurts." Grace nodded. She felt it too, like a wound in reverse, like scar tissue breaking open to let healthy flesh grow. Why does it hurt? May asked the air. The cowboys. God. Anyone who might answer. Hayes overheard. Sat nearby but not too close. Spoke quietly. Because kindness shows you what was stolen. Because mercy makes you remember what the world should have been all along. The hurt means you're healing. It's a good hurt, like muscles getting strong again after being broken. May translated pieces. The women absorbed what they could. Rosa spoke again, the question that had haunted her through the night. If they are kind, then who were the monsters? The logic of it was inescapable. They'd been told Americans were devils, but Japanese soldiers who promised protection had sold them. And now Americans, who should be enemies, were treating them with more humanity than their supposed protectors ever had. The contradiction shattered every certainty they'd built to survive. Hayes didn't have an answer, just honesty. Monsters wear all kinds of uniforms. So do good men. You can't tell by looking, only by what they choose to do when no one's watching. Murphy joined them, pulled out a photograph from his wallet, showed it to Grace, a young girl with dark hair and bright eyes, 16 years old, smiling in a dress that looked homemade but loved. My sister, Murphy said. Katie, she's your age. Grace looked at the photo, looked at Murphy, saw something in his face that transcended language. He saw his sister when he looked at her. That's why the gentleness. That's why the care. He was treating her the way he prayed someone would treat Katie if she ever needed help. Grace touched the photo gently. then touched her own chest. Sister, family, connection. She understood. Murphy nodded, put the photo away, but the connection remained. She wasn't just a victim to him. She was someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone who mattered. That night, Miller sat by lamplight writing in his journal. His handwriting was cramped, urgent, trying to capture everything before memory faded. August 19th, 1945. Treated 12 women today. Burns cuts rope marks on wrists. The physical wounds will heal. It's the other wounds I worry about. The ones that don't show on skin. These women don't need promises. They need space to breathe. They need time to remember that not all men are predators. Some of us are protectors. Some of us still believe in the code. Pa always said a man's measured by how he treats those who can't fight back. These women can't fight. They're too broken, too scared. So we have to be extra gentle, extra patient. That's the cowboy way. That's the only way. Today, Grace laughed while playing baseball. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Made me believe we're doing something right. Made me believe mercy still matters in this broken world. If I forget everything else about this war, I'll remember that laugh. I'll remember that we had a choice and we chose kindness. That has to count for something. That has to mean something. And he closed the journal, looked up at stars so thick they seemed to touch the earth. Somewhere out there, his own family slept safe in Iowa, because men had fought, because soldiers had bled, because the war had been won. But wars weren't won just on battlefields. They were won in moments like this, when you chose to heal instead of harm, when you remembered that the enemy wore a face, had a name, deserved mercy. That was victory, the kind that lasted. Morning of the third day came too fast. The trucks would arrive by noon. Orders were clear. Transport to Albuquerque hospitals. Process for repatriation or asylum. Get them into the system. Make it official. Murphy hated every word of those orders, because systems didn't care. Paperwork didn't heal. These women needed more time, more space, more proof that the world could be kind. But orders were orders. Even cowboys had to obey eventually. Hayes gathered supplies to take with them. Extra soap, extra food, blankets, anything to make the next part easier. He moved with quiet purpose, packing like he was sending his own daughters into the unknown. Miller brought out a bundle of dresses, simple cotton, donated by churches in Alamogordo. Nothing fancy, but clean, new, whole. The women stared at the dresses like they were made of gold. Rosa held hers up, blue with small white flowers, a dress for living in, for being seen in. Not rags, not uniforms. A dress that said, "You're a woman, you deserve beautiful things." Grace struggled with the buttons. Her hands shook. Too many emotions, too much change. Freedom was harder than captivity in some ways. Captivity had no choices. Freedom demanded them. Miller noticed, approached slowly. "May I help?" Grace looked at him, saw gentleness, saw her own fear reflected in his worry that he might scare her. She nodded. His fingers on the buttons were careful, efficient, but never lingering, like a father helping a daughter, like family. When he finished, he stepped back immediately, gave her space. Grace looked down at herself, at the dress, at fabric that fit properly, at colors that weren't gray or brown. She looked like a person again, like someone who might have a future. Hayes announced breakfast. Last meal together. He'd made something special. Pancakes. The smell of them cooking brought everyone running. Sweet batter on a hot griddle. Butter melting, syrup warming in a pot. Hayes flipped them with the precision of a short-order cook, each pancake golden and perfect. He served them on tin plates, drizzled syrup over the stacks. The syrup pooled in slow rivers, amber and sweet. Grace cut a piece with her fork, lifted it to her mouth. The texture was soft, almost fluffy. The sweetness of syrup mixed with the butter's richness. It tasted like celebration, like Sunday mornings and family tables and everything good that breakfast could be. Tears came again. She was tired of crying, but the tears came anyway, because this pancake, this simple food represented everything she'd lost and everything she might find again. Home, normalcy, the possibility of ordinary joy. Murphy watched her eat, reached into his pack, pulled out his harmonica, the same one he'd played that first day. the one that had cracked the wall of fear. He walked to Grace, held it out. For you. Grace looked at the harmonica, looked at Murphy, shook her head. No, too valuable, too important to him. Murphy pressed it into her hand, closed her fingers around it. Music belongs to everyone, ma'am. You take this. Remember that even in hard times, there's still music. There's still beauty. Grace clutched the harmonica, felt its weight, its smoothness worn by Murphy's lips and breath. This was more than an instrument. This was a promise, a symbol, proof that mercy had existed here. She reached into her pocket, pulled out something she'd made in secret over the past 2 nights. A bracelet woven from grass. Clumsy, uneven, but made with care, made with gratitude. She held it out to Murphy. His eyes filled. This tough cowboy who'd faced combat without flinching was undone by a grass bracelet. He held out his wrist. She tied it on. The grass was rough against his skin. Already drying, it would fall apart eventually. But he would keep it until it dissolved. Keep the memory long after the physical thing was gone. Thank you, he whispered. I'll treasure this. I swear to God, I'll treasure it. Hayes called everyone together, cowboys and women, formed a circle. He held his Bible but didn't open it. Let us pray, he said, not for the war to end, it has, but for peace to begin, in hearts, in homes, for healing that takes a lifetime but starts today, for courage to face what comes next, for memory of kindness when the world seems cruel, for hope, always hope. Amen. Through May's translation, the women understood enough, bowed their heads, added their own prayers in their own languages. A multilingual plea for mercy to last beyond this moment. The trucks arrived early, 3 of them, dusty from the road, drivers who knew nothing about what had happened here, just orders to transport women to Albuquerque. The cowboys helped load bundles. The women moved slowly, reluctant. This place had been a prison, but it had become something else, a place where kindness lived. Leaving meant facing a world that might not be kind. May approached Murphy, pointed to her phrase book, found the words. Thank you, friend. Murphy's voice cracked. Friend, as always friend. Maybe I come back someday, visit New Mexico. I'd like that, I really would. Rosa faced Miller. She'd been strong for everyone. The protector, the mother. Now her walls crumbled. You touch me like human. First time, long time. Miller understood without translation. Because you are human. You always were. Don't let anyone make you forget that. She hugged him, brief, fierce, then pulled away before emotion overwhelmed her completely. Grace stood before Murphy. She'd learned no English. He'd learned no Korean. But they'd learned something deeper than language. They'd learned that humanity speaks in gestures, in choices, in the space between cruelty and kindness, where honor lives. She held up the harmonica, mimed playing it. Murphy laughed through tears, pulled out another harmonica, the spare he carried. They played together. No sound, just the motion of breathing music into the air. A pantomime of beauty, a promise to remember. Then Grace did something that surprised even herself. She climbed into the truck, turned back, and raised her hand. Not a wave, not quite, more formal, an acknowledgement. A salute of respect from one human to another. Murphy raised his hand in return, not a military salute, just a man saying goodbye to someone who mattered. Rosa saw, raised her hand, then May, then others. 12 hands raised in the truck bed. 12 women saying, we see you, we recognize what you did, we will remember. And the cowboys raised theirs. 22 hands lifted to answer. 22 men saying you mattered to us, you changed us, we will never forget. The trucks rumbled forward, dust rose in clouds. The fort grew smaller. Grace watched until she couldn't see the cowboys anymore. But she could still feel the weight of the harmonica in her hand, still feel Murphy's kindness like a warm stone in her chest. The road ahead was uncertain. Home was gone. The future was blank. But she carried proof that mercy existed, that some men chose honor, that even in hell someone could light a candle. That would have to be enough, and somehow, impossibly, it was. 7 years slipped past like water through fingers. Grace Kim stood in a nurse's uniform at St. Vincent Hospital in Santa Fe. She was 23 now, no longer the terrified girl from the barracks. She'd chosen to stay in America. Couldn't face Korea. Couldn't face the shame her culture would heap on survivors. Couldn't explain what had happened in words that wouldn't shatter her family. So she'd stayed, studied, learned English through night classes and determination. Became a citizen in 1950, became a nurse in 1951, chose healing because Miller had shown her what healing looked like. Gentle hands, patient waiting, care without conquest. Now she worked with trauma survivors, accident victims, war veterans with shaking hands and night terrors. She understood wordless fear, understood that sometimes the greatest medicine was just being present, being kind, being proof that not all touch brings pain. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. Grace moved through her rounds with quiet efficiency. She was reviewing a chart when a name made her freeze. Murphy Jack, age 33, routine checkup. The chart slipped from her fingers, clattered on linoleum. It couldn't be. 7 years and hundreds of miles. What were the odds? She walked to the exam room, knocked, entered. The man on the table was older, thicker around the middle, gray threading through red hair, but the eyes were the same, green like spring grass, kind even when weathered by time. He looked up, stared, his face went pale. Grace Kim. She nodded, couldn't speak around the knot in her throat. He stood. They stared at each other across 7 years of silence, across a canyon of things unsaid. Then she opened her locker, showed him the wooden bird, still there, still carried every day. Murphy's hands trembled as he rolled up his sleeve. The grass bracelet was long gone, but he'd tattooed its pattern on his wrist, green lines mimicking woven grass, permanent, forever. I kept it, he said. The bracelet fell apart after 6 months, but I couldn't let it go. So I did this, told you I'd treasure it. They talked for 2 hours, caught up on lives, lived in different orbits. Murphy had married, had a daughter named Katie after his sister who died in 47. Grace had never married, focused on work, on healing others as she healed herself. They exchanged addresses, promised to write, and they did. Letterers every Christmas, photos of Murphy's daughter growing up, photos of Grace's nursing awards and promotions. Time passed, years accumulated like snow. 30 years after Fort Stanton, Grace received an invitation, memorial dedication, veterans and survivors gathering to honor what happened there. A plaque, a ceremony, recognition that something important had occurred in that desert fort. Rosa wrote from Manila, "We should close the circle. We should go back." May wrote from San Francisco, "It's time, let's remember together." Grace went, drove to Lincoln County on a bright October's day in 1980. She was 56 now, head nurse, respected, successful, but still carrying the girl she'd been. The fort looked smaller, buildings repurposed, barbed wire gone. A peaceful place now, historic site, no ghosts of suffering, just New Mexico's sun and wind and silence. The cowboys were there. Murphy, 66, walking with a cane. Miller, 68, retired but still carrying himself like a healer. Hayes, 75, still preaching every Sunday. And the women. Rosa, who ran a school for girls in Manila, teaching them they were more than what men did to them. May, a published poet whose words about mercy and war appeared in anthologies. Grace herself, and a few others. They walked the grounds together. Strangers would never guess their connection. But they knew, they carried it in their bones. That night they built a fire. Old habits. Cowboys knew how to build fires. Women knew how to gather around them. Murphy pulled out a harmonica, not the original. Grace still had that one, but similar. He played Red River Valley, the same song from 1945. Better now, practiced over decades. Murphy's granddaughter, 12 years old, asked, "Grandpa, why does that song make you cry?" He looked at Grace, at Rosa, at May. Because music says we're still human when the world tries to make us things. Grace spoke, in English now, accented but clear. This man's terrible harmonica playing saved my life. More than food, more than water, because it showed me that beauty still existed, that men could create, not just destroy. The granddaughter looked confused. "What happened to you, Miss Grace?" Grace had never told the full story, not really. Pieces to therapists, fragments to friends, but never the whole truth laid bare. She looked at Murphy, at Miller, at Hayes. They nodded. "Tell her. The world needs to know." So Grace told it, all of it. 2 hours of truth, the comfort stations, the terror of American arrival, the chocolate that seemed like a trap, the harmonica that cracked walls, the wooden bird that proved gentleness survived, the cowboys who chose mercy when cruelty would have been easier, the baseball, the laughter, the letters, the goodbye with raised hands. When she finished, the fire had burned low. Stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed it all 40 years ago. The granddaughter cried, "They hurt you so bad." "Yes," Grace said simply, "but these men chose not to. That choice mattered more than you'll ever know." Murphy's voice was rough. "We just did what was right." "No." Grace's voice was firm. "You did what was hardest. Easy to hate enemies, hard to see humans. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a man can do." 31 more years passed. Grace Kim, 86 years old, lay in hospice. Cancer, quiet, painless thanks to morphine, but dying. Her granddaughter sat beside the bed. The same girl from the campfire, now 42, a military nurse stationed in Afghanistan. She'd followed Grace into healing, carried the legacy forward. She held the wooden bird, worn smooth by decades of handling. She'd asked to borrow it, to take it to Afghanistan. Grace had agreed. "Grandma, I carried this on deployment. Used it like you used it, as a reminder." Of what? Grace's voice was weak but curious. "That even in war we can choose mercy. I treated an enemy combatant last week. Taliban fighter, shot up bad. Could have let him suffer. No one would have known. But I remembered your story, remembered Sergeant Murphy, so I healed him anyway." Grace smiled. The morphine made her thoughts float. But this cut through. This anchored her. "Good. You learned the right lesson." "What lesson, Grandma?" "Cruelty is easy. Mercy is brave." Grace's eyes closed. "Your great-grandmother in Korea never knew what happened to me. Died thinking I was lost. But I wasn't lost. I was found by a cowboy who played terrible harmonica. And that made all the difference." Those were Grace Kim's last words. She died peacefully that night. The wooden bird in her hand, Murphy's harmonica on the bedside table. Symbols of the mercy that had saved her life and shaped everything after. Her granddaughter kept both, added them to her pack, carried them to Kandahar, to Helmand, to every place where war made people forget their humanity. She showed them to young soldiers, told Grace's story, reminded them that the uniform you wear matters less than the choices you make. Jack Murphy died 2 years later at 98, the grass bracelet tattoo still visible on his wrist. At his funeral, they played Red River Valley. Grace's granddaughter attended, brought the harmonica, tried to play it, failed miserably. But Murphy would have loved that, would have laughed his goofy laugh and said music fixes what words can't. They were buried in Santa Fe National Cemetery. Different sections, different decades, but united by an August week in 1945 when mercy proved stronger than hate, when cowboys and comfort women found common ground in their shared humanity. The wooden bird sits in the Smithsonian now, on loan from Grace's granddaughter, small placard explaining its significance. Most people walk past without noticing. It's just a crude carving, rough wood, simple design. But some people stop, read the placard, learn the story, and something shifts in them. A small recognition, a quiet vow, a choice to remember that mercy matters. That kindness costs nothing but means everything. That in a world full of cruelty, choosing gentleness is the most radical act possible. Grace Kim's story is one of thousands hidden in World War II history. Acts of mercy performed in shadows. Cowboys who chose honor over hate. Women who survived horror and rebuilt lives. Ordinary people making extraordinary choices when no one was watching. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of values worth protecting, share it. Let others know what's possible when we choose mercy. Subscribe for more forgotten World War II stories. More moments when humanity survived against all odds. And remember, always remember that mercy isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do. It's what separates us from the darkness. It's what makes us human. The screen fades to text, Grace Kim, 1929 to 2016, Sergeant Jack Murphy to 2018, both buried Santa Fe National Cemetery. Their story lives on. The wooden bird rests in the Smithsonian. The harmonica plays no more. But the lesson echoes through generations. Mercy matters. Kindness counts. And sometimes in a broken world, a cowboy's terrible harmonica playing can save a life. Choose mercy. Always choose mercy. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's how we honor them. That's how we keep the story alive.